Inside New Orleans Sports with Eric Asher is underwritten by...
Located on Lake Pontchartrain, Brisbee's Lakefront Restaurant and Bar offers traditional West End favorites, a scenic view, oysters, and numerous tasty options. More information is available at 504-304-4125 or brisbeesrestaurant.com. Mr. Ed's Oyster Bar and Fish House has been shucking here since 1979. Located at 3117 21st Street in Metairie, Mr. Ed's Oyster Bar and Fish House offers raw, fried, and grilled oysters as well as a range of Cajun and Creole dishes. Enjoy a dozen with a smile.
Good evening, New Orleans, and welcome to another edition of Inside New Orleans Sports. I'm your host, Eric Asher. Over the next hour, talk a lot about the Saints as they are getting ready to take on the Baltimore Ravens tonight. Also, the LSU Tigers take on BYU in the Mercedes-Benz Superdome on Saturday night, and Grambling and Tulane at Yeoman Stadium on Saturday night as well. Got a great guest. You ask for him all the time. Mike Detillier, NFL analyst, college football analyst extraordinaire. Mike, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Eric.
Thanks for coming down as always. Certainly appreciate it. And Mike, let's start off a little bit with the Saints. And man, everybody asked me the question. I know they're asking you the question as well. The defensive improvement that we've seen so far through the first three preseason games, fool's gold, or is it real?
Preseason's the biggest mirage in the world. I mean, we've kind of seen a little bit and piece of this in the past when things have looked good and not turned out so well in regular season. I think partially it is the fact this team is better talent-wise on defense, smarter. Look at the linebacking core, A.J. Klein, Manti Te'o. Man, they know what to do on every play, Eric. So, again, you've improved yourself there. Anzalone has some talent, certainly a young kid at the outside linebacker position. But I think the one big improvement I see talent-wise is at the linebacking position. Those guys aren't out of position. They're in a spot to make a play. They're using a lot of blitzes. But listen, if I'd have closed my eyes and wouldn't know any better, I'd swear Greg Williams and Sean Payton made up because this defense is very similar to the defenses he ran in 09, 10, 11. A lot of pressure coming in different areas. You know, his big thing used to always say pressure breaks the pipe, and I'm coming at you. It'll be interesting to see how this translates over to regular season because I think the big difference is this: turnovers. It is the one stat in football you cannot win big and lose. And so for me, you haven't seen a lot of turnovers for this team. They haven't forced a lot, but boy, they put a lot of pressure on the quarterback. That's encouraging. I think you got to kind of take it a little bit with the grain of salt that this is preseason. Look who you've played, that sort of thing. And I never put a lot of stock in preseason. I watch individual play, though, and I do see where the talent level is different than a year ago. It's better. No question about it. It's a better football team. The best football player on that Saints field in the practice sessions was Cam Jordan. You couldn't have said that any other year than this year. He has been the most dominant guy on that football field in practice and in games when he's played. He has taken his game to another level. Sheldon Rankin shows a lot of potential as an inside pass rusher. And so that's a big help. I'm interested to see how the young kids react in the secondary when they're going to get picked on. None of them at cornerback have any experience other than Sterling Moore. PJ's got 2 games under him, then had the concussion. Ken Crawley, Devontae Harris have been, you know, kind of a part-time nickel dime type players. Never a full-time kind of operation. And you got the rookie Marshawn Lattimore. He needs to play like Marcus Peters did 2 years ago for the Chiefs when he wasn't good. He was at another level. So that part, no one will know until you suit it up and you play people early like Sam Bradford and Tom Brady and Cam Newton. And then you see how much better you are on defense. I am impressed, though, that you've got better talent, which I think leads to a better team. The biggest improvement I see is on special teams.
You know, Mike, I would agree with you. Athletically, they look better. You can say, again, more talented across the defense. That's up front, linebackers and secondary. Football IQ, smarter guys. Looks like he's got smarter guys going back to what Peyton did in 06 when he brought in not just guys that could play football, but very cerebral, understood the game. And I don't see a lot of mistakes. I don't see a lot of blown coverages, mistakes where guys are not filling the gaps they're supposed to be in the early preseason. Now, again, teams are not game planning. It's very vanilla in terms of what they're doing. But, I find it interesting that we've seen that on the defensive side where last year and the year before, you can look at this defense and say, wow, even in the preseason, they were blowing assignments. They weren't fast enough from edge to edge, and they didn't have the athleticism. And a lot of that, I think, has to go to coaching. Talk about the coaching aspect of this, whether it's the defensive line coach, secondary coach, linebackers coach. I got to believe that's got to be a big part of what we're seeing outside of the talent level being raised. The coaching has been improved as well.
I think working together as a group, because that's what football is all about. You got to work together as a team. And you see Ryan Nielsen comes in from the college ranks, and him and I got to work together at the offensive defensive line camp at Nichols. And so he was telling me, I'm teaching them new techniques, trying to get them to understand. Let's play with a lot of energy. He almost sounds like Ed Ogeron, but that's his mentor. And so you hear a lot of the same things. Now, he says it a different way,
sure,
but he says a lot of the same things Ed says about energy, takeoff, technique, making sure everything's right on each and every play. And I think that's been a big upgrade for them. Mike Nolan, no question about it. And he wanted guys that know what to do on each play. And again, I've preached that for years. Yeah. You can't just have athletes.
Right.
I think they got away from the smart guy who may be a tick slower than the rest, but boy, he knows the game. Now they've gotten people like A.J. Klein and Manti Te'o. Those guys aren't great players. They're serviceable, good players. They're not great linebackers, but they're always in a position to make a play. Again, I go back to Aaron Glenn, I think is an excellent defensive backfield coach. He'll really be tested this year because of the fact you've got a lot of youth, not only at cornerback, but also at the safety position. Yes. And Sean's brought this up numerous times. We've talked about it in the offseason before, about playing nickel coverage so much, having a lot of space game, meaning playing a lot of three corners, or what he calls a big nickel, three safeties. So now you've got to have people that fill those slots in real well. I think Kenny Vaccaro also, along with Cam Jordan, has had a terrific camp. So all those things come together. I think the key is going to be, can you get pressure consistently on the quarterback during the regular season? And does that help you with takeaways? Yeah. Pressure is one thing. Man, don't give me the stats about almost a hit and almost a tackle.
Hurry.
That to me is, irregardless of how you want to look at those stats, that does not measure up. Because this team's been 1, 2, or 3. Well, why? Because teams are throwing the football, so they should have more hits and more hurries on the quarterback. Yes. It's all about takeaways. I gave you this stat before. From 2006 till today, the New England Patriots are plus 144 in giveaway takeaway. Think about that. In a 10-year span, this team is 144 on the plus side. Yep. And the Saints, they've only had a couple years where they've been above that. Most of the time, they're in the negative stage. So again, does this lead to turnovers? Because I do think that one stat defensively tells you you don't have to be a great defense, but if you can just be middle of the road, this offense is going to be a top 5 or 6. The other part, too, special teams. I think coaching has really paid off. Look, since they brought in Kevin O'Day, how well he's worked with Will Lutz. Yes. Will Lutz has been a totally different kicker since they brought him in. He's been gold ever since O'Day came into here. And Brad Banter working with the units. I think this is maybe Thomas Morstead's best preseason practice sessions. He's been outstanding. The coverage units, that's what I want to see. Don't give up the big play there. We've seen Chris Banjo show up big time in that department. Up front along the line, I knew eventually, and we talked about this the last 3 shows we did, they're going to go out and get a deep snapper, and they just won't get one from the Eagles. So I think you're better there. remember last year, your special teams cost you 3 games. 3 games directly affected by poor special teams play or breakdowns up front.
Right. Now, Mike, I would agree with that, and I think that they've gone out and picked players up off of waivers or practice squads that they knew were good special teams players. They've tried to upgrade that special teams. It's been by design. This hasn't been an accident. It's been by design.
Yeah, and I think I still think this roster, even when they get down to 53 Saturday, by Tuesday, they will have tinkered with that. There'll be 3 or 4 more additions, and you can see where they wanted to hit. Listen, can't tell me they were one of the teams that made that big play for Hayden.
Yes.
They wanted Joe Hayden. Sean Payton's always had a love affair, so to speak, with Joe. They tried to make the deal last year for him, but it got too expensive price-wise to give up. He gets cut loose. I can understand why Joe would go to Pittsburgh. You can kind of stick it to the Browns a little bit, and they're paying him a ton of money to do so on a multi-year deal. But what was funny when the reports first came out was there were a couple teams that offered even more than the Steelers. I'm willing to bet you a few coins. I know one of those teams that offered quite a bit to bring in Joe Hayden. And I think when he's healthy, Joe Hayden's a good football player. But he's been racked with injuries.
Last 2 years.
And he's had groin and that dreaded sports hernia surgery twice this offseason. So we'll see what happens.
Yes, no doubt about that. You know, Mike, you mentioned about smart players. And just going back in time, Jonathan Vilma, Fujita, Shanley, Semino, all linebackers that may not have had the great athleticism, but all were guys who were pretty smart players. And look what they did for this team leading into a Super Bowl championship.
They were a big part of the Super Bowl run and almost a second shot at that particular deal. And the craziest thing, I go back to Vilma, and people always ask about some of the best trades the Saints have ever made. That goes down as one of the top 3 because of the fact that only one other team made an inquiry for Vilma when the Saints made the deal. That was the Lions. So, he was out there, and there wasn't a lot of teams wanting to go after Jonathan. They bring him in here, and he was a huge difference maker. And so, again, you don't need to, I think of the great linebackers, when you think about it, especially in the middle and even outside, they're always the guys that create turnovers. If it's been, we saw Dick Butkus, Jack Lambert. You think about Ray Lewis, Luke Kuechly today. Doesn't matter if it's in the run game or against the pass, they come up with turnovers. A.J. Klein, Manti Te'o is not going to be that type guy, but they're in a position to make a play, and they can play all 3 downs. You couldn't have said that about a lot of the linebackers that have been in here the last 3 years. Come 3rd down, those guys are out of there, and they don't match up well against running backs and tight ends downfield.
Let's talk about, with these cuts coming up on Saturday, and again, the Saints are expected to make cuts before Saturday. It's a different animal now, 90 to 53. I had a caller on my show recently that made I thought was a valid point. Teams have got to be having a board now, almost like draft day.
It is.
Where again, you're looking at guys that are on the bubble on other teams, especially veteran guys or guys that maybe you've been watching in the draft that you really liked. And it's almost like, again, a draft-a-palooza type situation because everybody's going to be out there trying to grab the best of the best that are going to be cut from these teams come Saturday.
That's why last show I told you, I think the one difference between this year and maybe years past, more trades, and it's happened. You've seen more trades this year than any other year in the last 5 because of the fact teams don't want to wait until that weekend. If I want a guy, I want him now. And so you've seen almost Buffalo, Cleveland, like fire sales, trying to get rid of some of the money type people, and there have been a lot of deals out there. And I think you'll see some even more as we get into that Saturday mode. So I think that's the big change. There was a lot of talk of trades, but rare was there a trade. True. Now today, there's a lot more action involved with trade talk. And so that's the big difference. And I agree with you about having that board. Because you can look at this football team, they're looking to try to get another offensive tackle. Something happens to Ramczyk. I mean, you got a situation here where you understand that might not turn out well, and you may have to move Pete over to the tackle spot and do some maneuvering, which you really don't want to do. Same thing at cornerback. I still think that this team will go out and get a veteran cornerback. That's a lot of youth, a lot of inexperience. Man, I want a guy that's walked down that football aisle before. And a lot of people don't like to hear that because, I got my 53-man roster made. Well, that's your 53-man. That ain't the coach.
Exactly.
He's the guy with it on the line. So I do think you'll see the Saints probably make, 3-4 maneuvers from Saturday all the way through till Tuesday.
Yeah, I would agree with that, especially along the offensive line, which I want to go to now. I mean, again, when Armstead comes back and Ramczyk maybe goes to a backup, between him and Clemente, you could say, okay, that they got a pretty good depth there. But I agree with you. I don't see anyone on this team right now that's in a backup role that I would keep long term here. I would be looking for veteran help, and me, especially a swing guy that can play multiple positions as the cuts come down.
Yeah, and Randy Mueller used to always say, I want to dredge the bottom of that roster. You know, almost weekly. We're looking for a guy that can help us win that week and maybe another week. And then we take a look at it again. And I do think that that is the NFL today. And just remember, if you're on that final 53 on that Tuesday, your money's guaranteed for the rest of the year. I think week 2, you're going to see even more maneuvers because now you got veterans that some teams, I don't know, we might not have the money to kind of maneuver around that. They'll make that move toward that veteran player.
And 2 guys that might be in that position with the Saints are McDaniel and Tapp. Again, 2 guys that are veteran guys that were expected to be with this team, but as vested veterans may be on the street for week 1. Your thoughts?
It could be. I don't know if both will, but I think at least one will. And I do agree with you. That's always kind of shuffling. And we've seen this from Sean Payton before, and even before with Jim Haslett, whoever's been the coach here, kind of shuffling the deck of that final 3 or 4 spots. And that's where if you can play special teams, hey, you can help me now. You know, I've got a backup running back or I've got a backup safety. But if you can help me in making big plays on special teams, you can help me today.
Yes. Well, as I mentioned before, by design, you look at Craig Robinson, you look at Banjo, you look at Nate Stupar, guys they brought in, maybe as special team players that ultimately contributed, at least last year, to the regular defense, and which was a little bit of lagniappe. Of course, you look at Stupar now injured. Hopefully that he'll be able to come back, and it won't be something that's going to keep him out.
And it's funny how now the line's gotten long as the return men.
Yes.
Tommy Lee Lewis, Devontae Harris.
Right.
Man, they got their hands way up in the air.
Sure.
Hey, put me on special teams.
Of course.
Because it's harder. The more you can do, better chance you have to stay on a roster.
With that said, let's talk about the wide receivers. A lot of talk about Corey Fuller. I liked him. I liked it when they pulled him off Detroit's practice squad. Tommy Lee Lewis has had flash play after flash play. He does more things than Fuller. How do you think that shakes out when you get to that wide receiver? Is it going to be 5, 6? What do you think happens there?
The first time I thought it might be 6, I think it'll be 5. Because, I'm a big believer in the skilled people of the world are offensive and defensive linemen. Those are the guys that are hardest to find. You lose a couple of those guys and find people on the street that can come in. So I got to keep extra there. And I think they'll keep 9 offensive linemen, 9 defensive linemen. So that's 18 pieces of your roster. So that's going to take away from having an extra receiver. And I thought the battle would be for the 6th spot between Corey Fuller and Jake Lampman, because Jake's a terrific special teams guy. I think, Corey may be odd man out here. Tommy can do a lot for you, and boy, he has made a bunch of plays, and they like running that little jet sweep. That's something he does really, really well. He can play on special teams as a return man. I think they keep 5. I think what will surprise people is I think they'll keep 11 defensive backs, 6 corners, 5 safeties. And again, I go back to it. This is a space game now where you keep less linebackers and more defensive backs. And so I can find a linebacker that can fill in. But man, let me lose a big offensive defensive lineman. Where am I going to find him?
Yes.
And it's like that in college football too. Coach O and I were talking about this just a couple months ago about, he said, what's the biggest change? In high school football today, 7-on-7 has changed the world. And it's remapping the NFL world. Because if I've got a big 6'5", 300-pound guy, he's not playing defense anymore. He's protecting my quarterback. I got a 6'4" or 6'3" guy who's 215, 210. In the past, he would have probably played outside linebacker, maybe stand-up defensive end, playing wide receiver and tight end. 7-on-7's changed all of that. I can practice that 12 months out the year.
Yes.
And so it's changed the flow of talent into the college ranks and from college to the pros. You don't see a lot of teams with depth on defense anymore. And it's funny, Chip Kelly, I went to a coaching conference a few years back, and Chip Kelly, this was his last year at Oregon, and he brought this up that he saw it coming. He said the tsunami's going to hit because he said 7-on-7 is going to change a lot of things. And he said, if I can keep you on the field, 75 players or more in a college game, you're going to lose almost 90% of those games. 9 out of 10, I beat you. You think about the Super Bowl national championship game. Okay, Alabama, which had one of the best defenses I've ever seen, come up with turnovers. They were 3 and out, 3 and out, 3 and out. Over 90 plays they stayed on that field against Clemson. They got wore out. Atlanta, for 3 quarters, really played terrific defense. And then the Patriots got a hold of the football.
Yes.
Over 90 plays. They just got wore out. You don't have enough talent there depth-wise to compete against. I think the twos on offense are better, much better than the twos on defense today. I think that's what 7-on-7 has done to the world, and it has changed the way you draft and the way you recruit.
Talk about this rookie class. All rookies make the roster?
Yeah, I think every one.
I believe so.
I think every one of them make it, and that's the most encouraging thing for me.
Yes.
Because in the past, we've seen guys we knew could not play.
Undrafted free agents making the team.
And so, man, to see, I was really impressed with Lattimore in that he comes in, he gets hurt, he has sparing time, and then it was sort of funny, the Thursday with the camp with the Texans, he goes out because he's a little woozy, lightheaded. Well, his PR people got to do a better job.
Yes.
They got to come up with a better excuse than that. But then you watch him in the game, he had a couple times that he made plays with the ball in flight. He's got one thing I can't teach him, or any coach can't teach him: ball skills. You got guys that are big, fast, strong, can't find the ball in flight. Lattimore can. Same thing with Marcus Williams. Now, the one play I think he'd like back is, you see it, he's trying to catch the ball almost like a punt. Now, you can do that in the Pac-12. You can't do that in the NFL.
Yes.
But he's smart, made a lot of big plays. I think Ramchak's going to do a good job at that left tackle position. Anzalone, I think, has played much better than anybody thought he would.
Agreed.
This quick, and Muhammad flashes it.
Boy.
He flashes
To the
it.
point that you could not cut him and put him on the practice squad.
No, you put him on. You cut him, you're never going to see him again.
Right.
Somebody else is going to pick him up. He's been the guy that you maybe thought, I don't know if he's going to make this team. He's made this 53-man roster. The one guy I'd like to see a little bit more of, we haven't seen, and some injuries have been involved, is Trey Hendrickson.
Yes.
But I think every one of them make this roster.
I agree.
And that is a big plus for a team desperate to hit on draft day.
And free agents that now will contribute this year, okay, instead of maybe being in the tub, or guys that did maybe live up to the expectations of when they were given the contracts. I think you'll see those free agents contributing this year.
Yeah, and so, the offseason, you couldn't have written almost a worse script. You lose fairly in one of the most unconventional things you could possibly imagine. Armstead gets hurt in a practice session. You say, here we go again. Then Unger, you didn't know about him.
Gave up on Ellaby.
Well, I think Ellaby gave up on them.
Yeah.
I think Ellaby did what he had to do to get out of here.
Really?
I'm convinced he didn't want to be here. Because, come on, you look at that. There were some players that have told me they had bets in the locker room. How many games is he going to play? Because he really didn't like it here. He wanted out. And listen, there are some players who don't like to be where they're at.
Yes.
So you know what? They cut up enough, or they don't, practice or play, and they get themselves released. And so it's interesting how the offseason has been a lot of negativity, and yet they've been very fortunate in preseason. No major injuries so far, knock wood.
Yes.
And the fact that you come into the season looking really good at your strength, and that's on offense.
Right.
That's where you're going to make your bread.
Yes. Let's talk about the secondary. Do you like the secondary overall? Do you like the depth? Looks like Delvin Breaux will go on the short-term IR. And again, hopefully he can come back healthy, not like last year, where again he didn't come back healthy and then he was gone for the rest of the season. What do you like? What do you like? What do you not like about the secondary?
I like their aggressive play. That's the one thing that sticks out. I see Devontae Harris. I know he's not Deion by any stretch, but he plays with the cockiness. Man, listen, you beat me, so what? I'm gonna come back and get you the next play. I think Lattimore's got that little kind of piece in him. I like P.J. Williams. I would want to see them go out and get a veteran corner. I think that can help this football team and help them now. I need to win now. I know who I got to play 6 games. I got to play Matt Ryan twice. I got to play Jameis Winston twice. I got to play Cam Newton twice. And I know one thing, that Bradford and that Tom Brady guy is pretty good, and so is Aaron Rodgers. So I've got to go up against that. I would want another veteran corner. I feel much better at the safety position because there's a little bit of a mix there with Kenny Vaccaro, with Von Bell. You got Marcus Williams. Banjo's going to come in and contribute.
Raphael Bush.
Bush, I think, will help them not only when they play that big nickel with the third safety, but also on special teams. You remember the first game, he had 2 tackles.
Yes.
He led the team in tackles right off the bat. You'll see him in there. And he's the intimidator type. So I like the mix at safety. I like what they've got at corner. I just wish they would get a veteran guy that can come in and say, you know what, I've been through this before, and I'll help the young kids.
Which is why they were going after Hayden.
Why they were going after Hayden, and I think that they'll go after another veteran cornerback. I think Sean, as no doubt, doesn't feel quite right going into the season, knowing he's got all this youth and experience at corner. You can be talented. That don't mean nothing.
Right.
Ed Reed told me this years ago. He's like, Mike, I try to tell these young corners and safeties when they hit the NFL about they don't care about what you did in high school. Man, don't show me your high school credentials and all these press clippings from college. They're going after you. Don't matter if you're the first pick in the draft or the last pick in the draft.
Gotta prove it.
He told me his first game he played in Baltimore with the Ravens, they threw at him 13 times. Now, he said, that number diminished throughout the years pretty good. Now, he said toward the end, come Super Bowl Sunday, you know how many times they threw at me? They threw at me twice. I knocked down one and I almost intercepted the other one. So he said, man, I was a much better athlete when I came in the league, but I was smarter.
Right.
And I learned how to be mentally tough. He said, I see a lot of these guys today, they throw at them. First time they ever get really tested in life, football-wise, and they break down. So then they start making physical mistakes. So he says, you know what? I've got to see how that guy holds up. It was funny, we had a little text deal going last year with Jalen Ramsey, who a really good safety at Florida State, gets picked early by the Jacksonville Jaguars, and early in the season, he got beat. But, hey, didn't matter. You could see it in his body language. Gave up a play, hey, make one. The last 7 games of the season, Jalen Ramsey, he was a stud football player for Jacksonville. He showed he could take that mental challenge, and he was mentally tough, and then he started to make plays on the back end.
Can Lattimore be that guy?
I want to see how well he holds up. They're going to pick on him, and he knows it.
Yes.
Because he's basically said it. They're going to pick on me. How well he holds up when the barrage of picks get thrown at him more and more and more. And it's not about coming up with interceptions. It's about making a play on the ball. So that's the part about a young secondary you don't know. Now they're in starting alignment or in the nickel. You put on center stage now. You've got to be able to make plays.
Mike, we've seen a lot of blitzing through the A-gap, a lot of linebackers. How they're going, again, they're probably going to have to manufacture pass rush. Where does the pass rush come from? Do you have faith in the guys that will be playing on the ends? Is it Sheldon Rankins up the middle, or will they manufacture it with safeties, corners, and linebackers?
I think they'll do a mix, because the guy on the other side, I think, will be kind of interchangeable. I think Okafor has shown some flashes certainly there. And it'll be interesting to see Kakaha.
Right. Can he stay healthy?
Can he stay healthy? And he has shown that he can get you edge pressure. Now, if I see him with his hand in the dirt, I'm running the ball right at him.
Amen.
And I'm going to slow him down real quick. The development of Onyemata, I think, is key. I think Rankins is going to really, really play well. But if you can get Onyemata to flip that switch, and he has flashed it, that would be interesting, because then you could rush 4, drop 7 in coverage. But right now, they're not good enough. They're just not good enough to do that. So I think you'll see blitzing with the linebackers and safeties. I think because you have to. And you're going to have to take your chances, which means a lot of one-on-one coverage downfield with a young secondary.
I put this on social media before the game against the Texans. Points allowed and also turnovers, huge for a defense. I guess you can throw sacks in there as well. What are the key stats for you when you look at a defense going forward?
Turnovers right off the bat. And third down, getting off the field.
That's a good point, yes.
I think sacks are somewhat overrated. Look at the Patriots and the Falcons sacks last year. They're in the same zip code as the Saints. There isn't much difference between those numbers. But the turnover margin is the big difference. I think that's key. And I do think, Eric, one thing you'll see more and more of, and that it's not been a key stat, but I think it will more and more because, again, this is a little bit of residue from 7-on-7 interceptions. Because now you're able to practice this a lot, going up against a receiver, just not knocking the ball down, coming up with the interception. Kansas City has been almost at the top of that list. If they're not one, they're either 2 or 3 the last 3 years. And they ain't no great shakes on offense by any stretch.
Right.
They win because they get turnovers. They get interceptions. I think that is going to become a very key stat. I'd love to have 50 sacks. Love to have it. But how many teams are going to get that?
Right.
You saw the Broncos 2 years ago. They got a ton of sacks in that particular deal. And they had a team that turned the ball over quite a bit. But I do think giveaway, takeaway, getting off the field on third down, interceptions. For 2017 Saints defense, that would be what I would look at.
Well, at the running back position, how do you think Peyton utilizes these backs? Obviously, it looks like it'll be Kamara, it'll be Lasco, it'll be Peterson, and also Ingram, and of course Kuhn will be the fullback.
Yeah, I agree.
What do you think?
I think whoever has the hot hand.
So he's going with the hot hand.
I think he's going with the hot hand. Almost like if you're playing cards,
right?
You know when to throw those cards down and leave at night. You know, you walk away. It's just not your night to do it. It's difficult for me to believe a guy that has been as good as Adrian Peterson is going to say, man, I'm happy being a second string running back. And he's kind of said it just a couple of days ago.
Within the last couple of days, yeah.
Listen, man, I ain't been never been second string. I'm sure Mark Ingram, never been, part of that rotation early maybe at Alabama he was.
Yes.
But other than that, he was never no second string running back. I think it's going to situational play, but I think whoever has the hot hand, that particular deal. And I also want to see once he starts getting hit after games 2 and 3, how well his body responds to it.
And holding on to the football.
He's had a little trouble with that, but I tell you what, he made a great catch against the Texans in between 2 defenders in the practice session that surprised me of how well he caught the football. I remember talking to Brett Favre a few years back, and he's like, he can catch it. He said, now, he's got the biggest mitts in the world. He said, man, he can catch it. Now, he said, again, I think in that offense, to get him the ball out in the flat, to see what he can do, I think the accumulation of hits, though, is still the mystery. I told you this story before. Jimmy Taylor told me, I was in the best shape of my life. I signed with the Saints 32 years old until I got hit. And he got hit multiple times.
Right.
And he said, I wasn't the same player, but I could still catch the ball. If you look at that last year, that first year of the Saints, Jimmy caught a lot of passes coming out of the backfield. He wasn't noted for that. That was Horning's gig in Green Bay. But so I think the part here, maybe overlooking is, I think Alvin Kamara is going to play a much bigger part in this offense than a lot of people think. Not only as a receiver, but as a runner.
Right.
He doesn't have much thread off the tires, man, and he can scoot. And I look at him from a speed standpoint, he's similar to Reggie Bush. Now, I think Bush was a faster player, but I think in space, Alvin's got more juke than what Reggie did. And he runs better between the tackles than what Reggie did. And Reggie was a really good football player, really good for this team. So I think while we talk so much about Ingram and we talk so much about Peterson, I think, man, if you're a fantasy football league player and you got a later round pick, man, grab Alvin Kamara, because I think once you hit that midseason mark, you're going to see him used a lot as the receiver, edge runner, and injuries happen in the NFL, and it happens in bunches, and a lot of times you get your running backs nicked.
You're watching Inside New Orleans Sports. Our guest tonight, Mike Detillier, college football and pro football analyst. We'll take a quick break. We'll be right back. Going to talk some more Saints. We'll talk some LSU and Tulane. Don't go anywhere.
Located at 3701 Iberville Street in Mid-City is Katie's Restaurant and Bar. Open 7 days a week, Katie's offers daily specials for lunch, dinner, and Sunday brunch. Serving New Orleans cuisine such as fried shrimp platters, grilled redfish, and a fully stocked bar. And don't forget about our expanded event seating and local entertainment. Featured on the Best of Food Network's diners, drive-ins, and dives, Katie's Restaurant and Bar. Amco Fence, locally owned and operated since 1976. Fully licensed and insured and a member of the BBB, Amco serves both residential and commercial customers. If you're looking to repair, replace, or install a fence for security or aesthetic reasons, Amco Fence supplies wooden, metal, chain link, vinyl, and ornamental or automatic gates. Amco aims to satisfy your fencing needs. Amco Fence, 504-468-9559 or amcofencecompany.com.
TikTok Cafe, located on Causeway South at the I-10 in Metairie, is open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Our menu offers breakfast dishes like our Western omelet made from scratch biscuits, grits, egg sunny side up, and lunch specials like our homemade cheeseburgers with a side of golden brown fries. Don't forget about our weekday lunch special, and that every Tuesday is steak night. TikTok Cafe, open 24/7 at Causeway South at the I-10 in Metairie.
Welcome back to Inside New Orleans Sports. Our guest tonight, Mike Detillier. Mike, bubble guys that are on the bubble that are going to be right there, that tonight's Saints game is going to be a big, big push for them, whether they make the roster or whether they make the practice squad or not. Because a lot of these guys, again, that are on the bubble have a chance, especially going from 90 to 53, to be able to move through and make it to the Saints practice squad.
I think a couple guys to watch. One is Obum Gwacham, the defensive end, because of the fact he's a really good special teams player. Now he's caught in a kind of a countdown at that defensive line position. Do you get him on the roster, or is it Darryl Tapp? Because I think it's going to come down to one of those two you're going to have to jettison. Do you keep the younger player that can help you on special teams, or do you keep the vet?
And Tapp is a leader in the locker room, right?
And he's a guy that's walked down that aisle. He's done everything. And if you decide just to go with 3 defensive tackles, you could always slide him inside. The linebacking core, I think, is not quite set at the 6th spot. I think you see all these linebackers coming in. That's telling you, I'm looking around, so that tells me Mike Marty, Stephon I think Stephon is a long shot to make it.
Injured reserve or cut?
I think probably outright release. You've tried it with him, and physically, he's got it all.
He's got it all.
But it's not clicked with him. And people say, well, they won't cut a first-round pick. No, you got to move on. If it's not working, you got to move on and bring you somebody that can help you out. So I think that, the Mike Martys of the world, Stephon Anthony, Adam Big Hill, you'd love to keep him. I think he's more of a practice squad guy this year on that. I'd love to keep Corey Fuller. I just don't see how you're going to be able to do it numbers-wise on this team. And I could see Trey Edmonds, who has really played well. I think he's a practice squad guy.
What about Victor?
Victor's another guy that could well end up being a practice squad type guy. He's not going to make the 53, neither Trey. No. But they've shown enough that you would like them to hang around. Because, again, I go back to the running back position. That has been one thing in doing kind of some statistical deals. Running backs have taken some big hits throughout the years where you lose them for long stretches or for the season. It's the #1 injury spot on your football team over the last 5 years has been at halfback. So you want to keep a couple guys on that practice squad.
Arthur Millette?
I think Arthur's probably a practice squad guy. Yeah. Again, I think that this team will either make a trade or pick up a veteran cornerback.
Right. Yeah, I would agree with every one of those as you talked about as being bubble guys. I'm going to be interested to see what they do with Anthony, though. Do they put him on injured reserve because he's been injured and hadn't been in the game the last few weeks, or is it just an outright, we've given up on you, you can't get it mentally, and they're going to move on? We'll see what happens.
I just think that, you know what, the worst thing you can do with a mistake for you is to keep it.
Yes.
I go back a few years ago, the Patriots picked Dominique Easley from Florida in round 1. Well, Bill doesn't like players who don't spend a lot of time studying, and they better know what they have to do mentally on every play. Well, he got enough of it. He told Easley, hey, get to stepping. He got picked up by the Rams, who's been a good player for them, but he didn't fit with what the Patriots were doing.
Yeah.
He's one of the few guys that actually, when Bills cut him loose,
Right.
he's actually went somewhere else and played. Now, the Saints made a deal, remember, a few years back with David Thomas, when they had a bunch of tight ends on that Patriots team, and they were able to bring him in. And David was a good football player for this team, really a solid across the board. But again, sometimes people don't get, a lot of times I talk about fit. Sometimes what fits for you doesn't fit for somebody else, and sometimes it's vice versa. You can get kind of fall in love with the athlete and you forget about the mental part of this game and knowing what to do. Give me the lesser athlete that knows what to do every play.
Yeah, and I think they've done that in some cases this year by bringing in guys that are smarter guys that are not making those mistakes. Mike, I think we both agree the talent has improved on this team.
Yep.
Will the record improve?
I think it'll be a notch better. And my thing is almost prove it. I'm going with 8-8. I picked that back in late June, so I'm not going off of that. I got to keep that thing in mind that, you know, they are better, but so is everybody else in the NFC South. And, you know, Atlanta's not going anywhere.
Right.
Now, I think the big question for me is how Atlanta gets over the mental ditch of losing that Super Bowl, because every close game in the regular season they lose, people are going to say, man, you got some of that Super Bowl kind of hangover, and they lost both their coordinators.
That's huge.
But talent-wise, they got more talent than anybody in the NFC South. Tampa Bay is very similar to the Saints. Almost proves to me that you are a playoff team. Now, they got a lot of talent in Tampa, but a lot of those guys have never, as a unit, walked down the football aisle. And we saw it last year when they tried to do it. Man, they squeezed up pretty good, and Carolina is a sneaky good football team.
Switch to the LSU Tigers. Nobody in the media is as close to Coach O as you are. Your thoughts, first of all, on the reports out there that maybe 6 or 7 players are going to be suspended for the BYU game. Obviously, it's a great thing that they're coming to the Dome. We'll get into that in a moment. But it seems as though, at least from the outside looking in, that Les Miles may have been a little bit more, I don't want to call it lax, but may have put up with a little bit more than maybe Coach O is. Coach O seems that he seems to be more, for a guy that seems to be a gregarious guy and a guy that loves life, seems to be a little bit more of a disciplinarian.
Yeah, you know, when he was young once too.
Yeah.
And he cut up too.
Yeah, did we all?
Yeah, so, you know, he understands that part, and the world sort of changed. And he understands that you've got to lay down a certain law. And you got to do that early with your football team, or they play you. In essence, because, you know, a lot of times almost like kids, I'm going to see how much I can get away with. Listen, I got a 3-year-old grandchild that tells me what to do every step of the way. Now, every once in a while, Pop got to say no.
Right.
But, you know, and sometimes I think as a first-year coach, you got to lay that law down. And you got to set a precedent that I'm going to put up with this. And, yeah, I'll give you a second chance. But there is a price to pay if you make a mistake. And I'm willing to give you that second chance. And for the really good players, we all know life ain't fair. They get second, third, fourth chances in life. But I think he's sort of wanting to set the tone here. Hey, listen, you know, whatever you're doing away from here, I'm not going to accept it. You've got to understand that this is all about you playing football.
How good is this team?
I think that they're a 9-win team, potentially a 10, depending on how far the quarterback will get them. I hear a lot of people say, you know, about average talent. Oh, they're average along the offensive line, average at receiver, average at tight end. Well, wait a minute. The same people saying that write columns and articles about that this team's been a top 5 or 6 recruiting team over the last 5, 6, 7 years. So how did that top 5 or 6 talent turn into average? My thing is, this is an inexperienced team at wide receiver and defensive back. And for DBU, they got a lot of young cogs back there that, you know, you don't know about. Talented, but they've never been really tested. Wide receiver, other than DJ Chalk and Russell Gage, there's not a lot on the resume. I think Foster Morrow is going to blossom into a really good tight end. I think that move to put him and J.D. Moore at tight end will really work out well. They're awfully thin along the offensive line. They cannot afford.
But are they talented enough?
They got talent there. They have talent there. There's no question they have talent, but it's young and it's thin. You have no numbers there. Didn't Will Clapp and Toby Weathersby and KJ Malone, weren't they put on all SEC second, third team, honorable mention? So don't tell me average. If those guys are on those teams, they're not average. So I think for Ed, I think early on with a new offensive coordinator, I feel much better about the defense. I think, they're going to get beat downfield. They're going to make some mistakes, but those guys are pretty good back there in that secondary. They'll dust the dust off, and they'll come back and make a play. How well and how quickly this offense gels. Man, listen, it don't take a rocket scientist to turn around and give it the football to Darius Geis.
Yes.
He's your stud football player. He's one of the top 5 players in college football, as not from a draft standpoint, but I'm talking about just football players. He's got to carry the load early. So if I'm Brigham Young and I'm Mississippi State, I'm playing 8-man up front and basically telling you, hey, you want to beat me? Throw it. I dare you to throw it. Etling has got to make those plays. He's got to make those one-on-one shots downfield. If it's to DJ, if it's to Gage, if it's to some of the young receivers. And I think you'll see a lot more LSU use the tight end and the backs, which were in the Witness Protection Agency under Coach Miles. He just didn't. He didn't like that part.
Yes.
The offensive line thing, I think, is a long-term fix. And I's had to talk about this because Les, he's always told me when I recruit guys up front, I want to build from the inside out. Well, that's not the game today. You got to build from the outside in.
Right.
And so I think that's going to take a little while to do that, to get you some depth. But boy, how quickly. Everybody said last year, man, the linebackers, they don't have no. Coach O today, he'll tell you, the best position he's got is outside linebacker with the talent, the young talents he's got there. The key is Arden Key. Now, you won't get him until Mississippi State. I'm convinced that that's when you'll see him play against Mississippi State, game 3. He's not going to play against BYU. He won't play game 2, but he'll be ready to roll. He's the most dominant defensive player in college football. He's on the field. At the Manning camp, it was so funny because I got interviews with about 8 different quarterbacks, and 4 of them play in the SEC. It all was the same. I asked him about Arden Key. Well, sometimes he's not even around to play, but almost like he had an odor. That, man, I'm getting rid of the football because he's right there. I was getting rid of it. He's got that type presence very few people have. Eric, I'll say this, and I've written it before. He's the best edge pass rusher I've seen at LSU in my 32 years doing this.
That's amazing.
He's the very best. No, he's a man out on the field. Chuck Smith and I, people might remember Chuck, he was with the Falcons.
Saints fans remember him.
Willie Roper remembers him because he was the one guy that gave Willie a lot of trouble because of his quickness and his leverage skills. From a Tennessee guy, he's got a camp for defensive linemen. He's told me, Mike, I've never had anybody like him here. He's that good. And then you've got a young kid in Kalavion Chason that I think eventually you'll see Chason on one side, Arden Key on the other side, and pick your poison who you want to block. I think the key guy here, though, I go back to Southern Cal last year. Nothing away from Sam Darnold, who I think is an unbelievable football player. But I think the guy that set the tone for that team was Adoree Jackson at cornerback. He gave up some plays. He's a little thin guy. I mean, he's about 180 pounds soaking wet. But if you tried him, he played defense like an offensive player. Interceptions and his skill set as a punt kick return guy. He averaged almost 16 yards a punt return, almost 30 yards a kickoff return. He brought 4 back for scores. If you're dumb enough to kick it to him, then he's going to bring it back. But then you saw punters and kickers, man, they were angle kicking out of, so it affected the whole game. LSU's got the closest guy to Adoree Jackson on this team, and that's Dante Jackson. He's an offensive player that's playing on defense. He can change the scoreboard with a punt return, pass interception. It's big for him to come up for LSU defensively. He can be the 3rd star for this football team. The one big question I have is how they deal with special teams, not having one special teams coach. Greg McMahon has coached this team, but he won't be on the sidelines. So now 4 different guys handle those units.
All consultants, right?
All guys. And one of the guys, Dennis Johnson, everybody calls him Meatball, but man, Meatball, he's big into this. He coaches the linebackers, but his thing is, special teams. How that comes out for LSU, because they're going to be in some close games where special teams is going to play a big part. how that works out. So, they got young talent, inexperienced talent, yeah. Don't tell me they're not talented.
Right.
Come on, because, Alabama is still a cut above everybody else. Georgia returns 10 starters on defense. But offensively, other than the running backs, everything's a little shaky. You look at Auburn, everybody's favorite. You got to prove it to me. You can win big. And so I think LSU is a 9-10 win football team this year. And it wouldn't be, man, I think that they will roll this through till they get to Gainesville on the road. And man, you talk about a hellacious game that's going to be when they play McElwain. And boy, he's losing guys left and right with suspension.
Yes.
So be interesting to see how that game shapes out. But I think they're a talented football team. Got two tremendous coordinators in Matt Canada, Dave Aranda. Those guys play football chess with one another each day.
Yes.
And I think Coach O has learned how to be the CEO. He's learned how to be the boss.
Which is what everybody wanted to see.
Yeah,
No
because
doubt
he
about it.
wasn't the,
Right.
and he tried to, he was a Cajun from the Bayou like me. He tried to micromanage everything,
Right.
but eventually you find out you can't. You've got to give that trust to other people.
Mike, Miles Brennan, the real deal?
He's a real McCoy. Closest thing, I grew up, Tom Hotson's much younger than me, but his dad coached me in high school, basketball and football. And so, but he lives basically, his mom and dad still live about a half mile from me. And he's the closest thing I've seen to Tom. He reminds me of it. Tom always says, what does that mean? He's a tall, skinny dude? I said, he's a tall, skinny dude. But man, he can play, he can throw the football accurately from the pocket, and you're gonna see him play in certain spots. You wanna get him some playing time.
You need to.
Because next year, now your 2 and 3 guy are both freshmen. I do think also, one of the things you will see with this LSU team, and he told me just during the summer, man, they said, listen, Mike, we're gonna play 14 to 16 freshmen. He told me that in May.
That's
I was like, come on, Junior. He's like, no, I'm just telling you, we're going to play 14, 16 freshmen this year. You look at that kind of depth chart that he's laid out. Now, he's not giving you one,
Right.
but look, you got 4 guys that are either considered starters or co-starters, and he's got a ton of those guys on special teams. I think that 14, 15, 16 might be right. I do see situations near the goal line, short yardage, where Lowell can come in. And listen, he does at the highest level.
Yes.
He's a big man that can run. Learning how to read coverages better downfield. If you watch him at St. James, he just wasn't protected well. It's not that he couldn't do it, it's just that he had no time to read. Man, I got to go because I'm running for my life. And then he got hurt the last 2 years. But Brennan is Tom Hodson all over with. And so I think you're in a pretty good spot at that quarterback position in the future.
Let's talk about Tulane. Tulane seems to have upgraded their talent, especially at the quarterback position. Willie Fritz has won everywhere he's been. He plays an offense that's tough to be able to deal with when you're not seeing it week after week. Defensively, they got a couple guys that look like they might be able to play on Sundays on that team. What's your overall thoughts on Tulane?
And listen, I'll be honest with you. I think from a technical standpoint, he's as good a coach as a head coach as you'll find. Man, the way he runs practices, the way he gets his team mentally ready to play each week. Most of those teams he's playing, they got more talent than him. And yet he was able to squeeze wins out last year. He's got to get better play from the quarterback position. There's no question about that. But I think a lot of that has to do with what happens up front. I think the offensive line play is key for Tulane early on. But I am so impressed with Willie in his intelligence as a coach. And now I think he's got a little bit better grasp of Louisiana high school football. That you just can't go out of state. You got to grab some of the guys here that can be difference makers in spreading the field out.
I think they work in his offense perfectly, Louisiana kids.
I agree. I mean, if I'm him, the one guy I will get, Lindsey Scott.
Yes, I agree with you. 100%.
My thing is, Lindsey Scott, had he signed with Tulane, he would be the starting quarterback today for Tulane. So again, he's willing to go out, and he's taken some JUCOs in that particular deal. So Willie Fritz impresses me tremendously as a coach. Now he's got to uplift the talent level because coaching can only get you so far, and then somebody can out-talent you somewhere. But basically, he was in every game last year. He played games tough. Special teams for me, still, that's an area.
That was their Achilles heel.
That was terrible for him last year.
Right.
And it really wasn't good under Curtis either. So they've got to correct that, because when you're, say, an average team in a conference, you can't lose a game on special teams.
You can't be snapping the ball over guys' heads or missing, shanking punts or missing field goals and extra points.
Tim Rebo's tired of me telling him this. Find you a kicker and find you a return man. They'll win you more games than that recruited receiver that maybe didn't make it at Alabama, but comes to your campus. That return guy and that kicker is going to be a big difference maker for you. And I think it's the same certainly for Tulane.
Yeah, you know, Mike, getting back to the town in Louisiana, how it fits with Tulane, obviously you look at the type of quarterback he's looking for. They have a lot of those type quarterbacks here in Louisiana. You know, we got running backs galore. We got guys on the outside that can catch the football and can run. But the linemen, we don't make the big linemen here. We don't have the big line, but we do have athletic linemen here in Louisiana.
That fits his scheme.
Exactly what he's looking for. I think the scheme is tailor-made for Louisiana high school kids.
I agree. The big problem is going to be keeping him.
Yes.
Because he's going to win, and then there'll be another school that says, hey, come over here. Listen, Paul Johnson ain't coaching at Georgia Tech forever.
Right.
Just think about that.
Sure. Oh, no.
Paul Johnson's not coaching
when he
at Georgia
wins,
Tech
you got to
forever.
hope that, again, he falls in love with this city, much like a Mark Schlesinger did at UNO, and wants to be here long term. By the way, congratulations to Mark with a extension on his contract at the University of New Orleans.
We talk about a great job last year. I think Don Landry and I, because we go back a long way, former head basketball coach at Nichols, athletic director guy there, and coach, an old teammate of mine, Larry Wilson, Larry was unreal. I think maybe the best basketball player I've ever seen in the state of Louisiana. He was unreal. And he told me last year, he said, you know, Mark Schlesinger in that coaching job did as good as anybody I have ever seen in my years coaching, of taking that talent and now moving it to another level. And he's got a bunch of big men coming in now that can really, really help out his basketball team. Interested too in Scotty Plaisance, who transferred from UL Lafayette, and kind of the connection there. His mom coaches at Nichols, Miss Doobie, and his sister is playing in the WNBA.
And doing a pretty good
and
job.
doing a really, really good job. So he's got some bloodlines that's pretty good there, but Mark's done a fantastic job. And I think that's what Willie is at Tulane.
Yes.
He's Mark.
Right. And he needs to be like Mark and stay there long term. No doubt about it.
But I do think eventually that Georgia Tech job.
Well, the big schools are going to come calling, as they always do.
It'll be a magnet. It'll be a magnet.
No doubt. Mike Detillier, always great. Thanks so much for being
with us. Thanks so much,
Eric.
I appreciate it.
Inside New Orleans Sports. Thanks so much for tuning in. Remember, there's a rebroadcast of this program each and every Friday night right here on WLE at 10 p.m. Also on Pelican Sports Television at statewide 9 p.m. on Friday. We're on the Cox Cable tier now. Thursday nights at 10, Saturday mornings at 2 a.m. if you're up that late watching the program. Catch me on the radio, 990 a.m. WGSO. That's 11 a.m. till 1 p.m. weekdays. You can listen live, download the podcast at ericasher.com. Also the TuneIn Radio app, a great way to take the show with you anywhere. All the previous episodes of Inside New Orleans Sports can be seen at ericasher.com as well. Special thanks to Mike Detillier, doing a great job on the program. As always look forward to having him. Also to the WLE production staff, including Ron Yeager, Jim Dotson, Kenny Juno, Trey Lopez, and my director, William Hill. Thanks so much for watching. Looking forward to the start of the regular season in college and professional football. We'll break it down for you next week on another edition of Inside New Orleans Sports. Have a great week.